Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is the author of the book Burned Over, no other than Miss A.J.Otjen.
Hello.
Welcome to Book 101, Miss AJ. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. I'm a professor at Montana State. I've been writing academically for many years, but creatively just for about the last 10. Excuse me. And this is my first nonfiction novel. I've got about seven children's books. They all have required research and are about Montana, but I'm very happy to be here and talk about this novel because the subject matter, the person that I wrote about, recently died, and he's somebody that's really worth talking about. The whole story is just an amazing story, and it's something that I plan to carry on and talk about for a very long time because the community, the family, the man. I tell other writers that if you want to write a nonfiction story, I think the key is to fall in love. You have to fall in love with the subject matter, the story, the community, everybody involved, because you have to go through the story. You have to feel their pain. You have to, really capture the love and put it on the page to do a good job. And it's a story that I will, keep with me for a very long time.
Miss AJ, this question is for the late Mr. Dan Steffensen. And can you please answer this question?
Sure.
So in the summer of 2021, he tried to outrun a 60-mile-an-hour wall of fire on the Harris Hill fire and were badly burned, with over 60% of his body affected. So can you take us back to the moment? What do you remember about the wind shift in your immediate response?
Because Dan was a senior firefighter. He was 65 years old, and firefighters have a protocol they go through. He was out there just fighting a very small grass fire, but the Weather Service had yet to report that there was a very large thunderstorm about 40 miles to the west, and in front of that thunderstorm was a downdraft. And downdrafts can be a long ways ahead of the storm and not even seen. And with that downdraft came a huge wall of fire. Now there was a helicopter right above Dan that was dropping water, and they couldn't see the thunderstorm on the horizon. They saw it on the radar, and they were about to tell the incident commander, "Oh, there's a thunderstorm. I see it on the radar a long way away." But they didn't see it on the horizon. And just as they were about to say that downdraft hit the helicopter and blew it off the bluff. And the wall of fire came right at Dan, and he tried to turn around and run, but there's no way. It was just coming right at him, and it just burned right over him. And he tried to run, but it caught up with him, and he didn't realize that he was so hurt. I mean, he got caught up to his engine, that it burned over the engine as well. And the driver was inside, but fortunately he wasn't burned. He just got really hot, and he caught up to the driver, and the driver said, "Well, are you okay?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm okay." And he was just kind of taking off all of his clothes and his gear. And the incident commander ran up and said, "Are you okay?" And he says, "Well, I'm burned over. I got burned over." They got on the radio and were saying, "Well, we're burned over. We're out of the fight." And they were looking at him, realizing he was really hurt. And he didn't know he was hurt, because when you're burned that badly, your nerves are gone. And they call them the walking dead, because their organs are starting to shut down. And everybody on the radio in the county, and they all know each other because it's a small county, and they're all first responders. They're all thinking, well, who's burned over? They're all listening on the radio frequency. Who's burned over? Oh my God, what's going on? And they're frantic trying to find out what's going on, because the incident commander is then saying, get the ambulance here now. They all realize he's really hurt. And the EMT gets there with the ambulance, and she says one thing: load and go. We're not taking any time, just load and go. And she was worried that she was going to lose him on the way to the hospital. And he's just saying, no, I'll take my boots off. They cost way too much money. Don't cut off my boots. He was just telling, just take me home. I'm fine. And that's how tough he is. And they were ready. They had to fly him out to the Utah, which is one of the best burn centers in the country, that night. And when they got him to Utah, he was out, and he was, tubes coming out of his mouth so he could breathe. And the honor guard at Utah met him, because that's what they do. They have an honor guard that meets every ambulance bay coming out of the airport, and they stand at attention from cover to shiny shoes, and they stand over the firefighter until they die. That's what the honor guard, the Utah Firefighting Honor Guard. And the thing is, Dan didn't die. He just kept living, and he was in a coma then for another 21 days. He stayed in Utah for a total of 65 days. And the burn recovery, we talk about it in the book, is an ordeal that nobody wants to go through. His family showed up. The community kept coming. The town needed him to come home, because the town of Red Lodge was going through hell that summer. They had so much going on, so many tragedies happening in Red Lodge that summer, that they needed Dan to come home. They had, and live. Red Lodge is a town that's right next. Go ahead. What was the question?
Yes. No, go ahead, miss. Sorry.
Red Lodge is a town right on the edge of Yellowstone National Park, right on the northern edge. In fact, it's a gateway into Yellowstone National Park over the Beartooth Mountains, the Beartooth Highway. And it's surrounded by forest and grass, or fuel. So they are on high alert every summer for fire season. The town is made up of firefighters or a family of firefighters. You're either in the fire department or you're a member of the family of the fire department. So they all know each other. They all knew Dan, and they just couldn't handle losing a firefighter, because they had a great big fire come up to the town earlier that summer. The Beartooth, that came right out of the Beartooth Mountains and came right to the edge of town, the Robertson Draw Fire. And then they had a hiker, a graduate of Montana State, very skilled hiker, went up to the Beartooth Mountains and didn't come back. So search and rescue, which was a part of the fire department, was up looking for them all summer long, and finally found her remains. This was all while Dan was in a coma. And then they had another firefighter who was a very talented snowboarder, because Red Lodge is also a ski mountain. He had a very young family. He had a skateboarding accident and hit his head and ended up on life support. And they finally took him off life support, and he died. So tragedy after tragedy after tragedy of this very small town. That Robertson Draw Fire was still going into October and November. So they had to have Dan come home. They were praying all summer, Dan, you've got to come out of the coma. You've got to come back, in Utah. You've got to come back home to us. First responders don't like to worry about people. They want to take care of people. And finally, he did come out of the coma and start that, horrific burn recovery of wound care, of debriding, PT. And he's not a good patient. He doesn't. He's horrible at staying still. And they figured out a way to bring him home early so that the town could take care of him and continue with his wound care and make him heal, so that the town could heal as well.
Yes, people, burned over is loving memory of the late Mr. Dan Steffensen. And Miss J, beyond the physical injuries, the narrative highlights the internal struggle to recover mentally. How did Mr. Dan make the trauma ease and the fear? And what role did therapy or peer support play?
Well, there's a chapter in there called "Let Me Die," because at first he did not want to continue. The pain was so bad, um, and there's another firefighter friend of his that developed cancer in his brain, and another young guy with a family, and he thought, why are Sean and Ryan dying? When they're young with families, and I'm sitting here and all having to deal with all this pain, and I'm still alive. Like, what is God thinking? God, just let me die. Save them, take me. And he prayed to God to let him die because it was just unbearable what he was going through. And the fire was one thing, but what he was going through in Utah was unbearable. And he didn't think he would ever get back to normal. And the burn survivors have a saying: it's between the past and the future is acceptance. And he had the hardest time accepting what had happened to him until he saw the other burn survivors. And they do have an amazing community of burn survivors and therapists that work together for a new when people who are burned come into the hospital. And so he met them, and until you see it, you don't believe it. And many of them are amputees. So once he saw Mark for one, and these are tough guys too. They're electricians, or they're race car drivers, or other firefighters, or they're little kids, that have had, firecracker accidents that are tough. And once he sees that, and once he saw them, he went, well, heck, if they can do it, maybe I can do it. So he got to work, and he started exercising and doing what they told him to do and going to wound care. And he ended up back on the fire line in 2 years. They told him it would take 3 years to be back to normal. But in 2023, he passed the PAC test, which is 3 miles and 45 minutes carrying 45 pounds on your back. He passed that test, still having some skin grafts to go through. He kind of lied to the fire department, lied to the hospital that he was doing both at the same time because he just wanted to be a firefighter again. Still needing some skin grafts, bleeding like a stuck pig, he always said. He took that PAC test and he passed. And then once he stopped bleeding from skin grafts, he was approved to be a firefighter and started being on. He started going into the western part of the Montana with a brand new engine that he had burned over E78 engine 78, and then they brought him back a new engine E78, and he was back on the western part of Montana fighting fires. It was amazing to see when he came back and the new engine came back. That was, he sent me a picture of the new E78, and that inspired me for the ending of the book. That they were both back together. There's a fondness for engines. If he was an engine boss, and when he was back and his engine was back, that inspired me for the last scene of the book. Which you'll have to read it. You'll have to get the book to read it. But it's a sweet, lovely ending. For that they were both back on the line.
Yes.
That's what he wanted to do. If he hadn't become sick, he would have been fighting. He would have been fighting fires this last year, but he had to start chemo, and that bought him another 9 months basically to start chemo. And otherwise, he would have been fighting fire. He would have been in California fighting these big fires in California, because Red Lodge has an amazing national wildfire unit that travels all over the country, and he did that with for years. And they still do that. And he wanted to join them desperately. It broke his heart that he couldn't go this year to fight fires with them. But it was getting back to being a firefighter that drove him to recover. And working with the other burn survivors and seeing that they had done it. That's what drove him. That's what told him that he could do it. Yeah.
Miss AJ, the book describes as a summer of hell when three other strategies struck your hometown. How do these simultaneous disasters frame your story, and why is it important to include them?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
The book describes a summer of hell when three other tragedies struck your hometown. How do these simultaneous disaster frame your story, and why is it important to include them?
Um, it was funny because Dan and I, when I started the book, Dan really wanted it to be a fire story. And I'm an academic, so I was doing a lot of research on fire and fire behavior and fire training and even storms and weather and fire and radio frequencies. And and Dan was sort of happy with that. But when I started interviewing the people that were involved, the community, his family, the doctors, um, I that's when I realized that it was a real human story. That the need for him to come back to that town because of what the town was going through, that was what made it a story that unfolded, was getting him home, and why it was so important for him to come home. And because I think I said earlier, he's in a coma for a third of the book. It's everything that's going around him, and why it was so important, and why he was so important to the people in that town. That made this, interesting to a layman. And so we butted heads quite a bit. I said, "This isn't a fire story, Dan. This is a human story," and we would butt heads. But then some of the reviews, one of them said, if you like Young Men in Fire, which was the Norman MacLean book, then you would like this book. And so he thought that wasn't too bad. He said, well, maybe it's kind of a fire book. I said, well, it's not, it's not the greatest fire book in the world, but it does have fire in it, a lot of it. But it really, people who read it, it's a quick read, but you have to stop and collect your emotions every couple of chapters, because it's very emotional about what happens, because of how close knit this community is, and what they're going through in terms of what they go through.
The,
Go ahead.
the book contains graphic images of burns and
There's pictures in there.
yes, profanity. Why is it
And a
important
lot
to
of profanity.
include yes
Yes.
and varnish details? Were the things you choose to leave out?
I would nothing about the burns really. Firefighters cuss, and so I left that
Yes.
in there. And Dan cusses all the time, so Dan wanted me to tell the truth, and a lot, and I told the truth about him, pretty much all the truth about him. I mean, to write this book, I had to pry him open and get him to tell me his feelings, and Dan doesn't share his feelings. So we had to become very close and trusted friends to write this book. It was incredibly emotional for both of us to get through this. So it was a couple of years of a lot of tears for everybody who I interviewed, and me and Dan, to tell this, to go through everything and tell this story. I think I said many times that when a writer asks me, how do you do something like this? I say, you have to fall in love with the subject matter, with the story, with everybody involved in it. If you're going to feel the pain and the emotion and capture the love and get it on the page, you have to fall in love with everything to get it down. Because I found so much love involved with everybody, and that I'm an academic. I had to become a narrative writer and capture the emotions of this story and get it on the page. And so I had to really raise my skills to do that. And Dan is not an emotional guy. So it took everything to get that out of him and everybody around him to do it. It was not, people said, was it fun? I said, no, it was not fun. There was nothing fun about writing this book. It was painful to do it. And yet it was one of the most worthwhile experiences of my life to make sure that this whole summer was memorialized for the people involved. Yeah.
Definitely. And Miss AJ, as an author, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Well, I have another children's book that's about to come out. It's with my other children's books are primarily about the Apsalaka Crow Indians in Montana, because we have something called Indian Education for All, which is a federal law to get um, historical, accurate books into our curriculum, and we've mainly failed about that. But my books we've got 2 in the curriculum, because I do a lot of research for them as well, and they're beautiful. We use Crow artists. One of them is by Kevin Red Star, who is sort of a national treasure, and that was chosen by the Library of Congress. So I've got a second book with him coming out. It's a pop-up. It'll be out in November. That's short term. Long term, I hope I retire as a professor in about 3 years, and hope to continue writing more after that. Don't know if I'll ever do another nonfiction. I don't know if there's a story out there that would, that would encourage me like this one did. Losing Dan is a big hole in my life, and I probably will continue to. Most of my stories are about history and courage in Montana, and morals and ethics. And so but they tend to be something that I've been able to tell a story that was based on something that like around folklore, or something that I could create or be more creative with. And this one really took a lot out of me because it was so true. I mean, I created some scenes to help move the story along, but there was just so much to it that required required everything I had to put it on paper. I don't think I'll probably be doing that again. It was not a joyful experience, whereas the other books I do are all joyful, and I'm going to focus on doing joyful things. Yeah.
Well, good luck to your goals, Miss AJ, and we salute you for sharing your book to the world. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
Like me in terms of writing, or just living in Montana, or
Yes,
what do you mean?
an author, an author.
Well, like I said before, fall in love with what you're writing about. I've fallen in love with the Crow tribe. I've fallen in love with the artists that I work with. I've fallen in love with Montana. I fell in love with Dan and Red Lodge. So fall in love with what you're writing about. If you really want to do a good job, you have to do that. That's my advice.
Yes, and thank you for that advice. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Books that have influenced me. Is that what you said?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Um, well, all the Michener books have influenced me because they're all historic. I love the research and the history of that. Also, all the Larry McMurtry books influence me because they're so historic. I like anything that requires a lot of research and a lot of history, and that tends to be what I focus on. Is anything that requires research and involves history and a good story. I love a good story. So
A good story indeed. And thank you for that recommended book. Miss AJ and the citizens of Red Lodge prayed for the life of Mr. Dan. How did the community's response influence the recovery and outlook?
he wouldn't have recovered without it. Honestly, if he hadn't been able to
Mm-hmm.
come home early and counted on the support of the community, I don't think he would have been able to recover without it. His brother also came home with him and was, his brother had been there in Utah with him, and he had learned how to do wound care and PT, and so he was able to come home and move in with him and do. And without that, he'd not. I don't think he would have recovered without it. So
Okay, Ms. Jay, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in its fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101 Love Letters in his third season, and Movie 101 Review Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Ajay, how has the story helped, or yes, how has your story helped the Red Lodge process the collective trauma of that summer? And have you
Uh,
seen it inspire other survivors or families affected by fire?
I've had great feedback. The burn survivors have told me that it's a very important book for the burn community and the firefighter community. The Red Lodge community, it was number one bestseller in Red Lodge last year, so I think it's been very good for the
Yes,
Red Lodge community. And by the way, are you going to show where people can get it? It's available in Amazon, in both
yes.
in Kindle and Audible, and in print. So you can go to Amazon and find it. And everybody in Red Lodge, I was very, I was very concerned. I felt a lot of pressure to get it right for the Red Lodge community, and they all showed up for the book signing. We had standing room only, and it made Dan and me feel very good about that. And they all were very appreciative. They were very happy with how the community was portrayed. The thing is I even say in the book that no nobody completely healed from that summer. They're still scarred, just like Dan was scarred. And what they found out was that they can survive hard things. They're resilient, and they can do anything. If they can survive that summer, they can survive anything. And that knowledge is an important thing to know. They know how to lean on each other. They know how to talk about it, and it's a town that's very tough and can survive very hard things because of what they went through in the summer of 2021. They call it the summer of hell, and they'll never forget it. So,
So, Miss AJ, do you see the book as a part of a broader effort to raise awareness about burn injuries, wildland firefighting hazards, or mental health?
um, all the above, but it also, and Dan wanted to accomplish this, it also is a great big thank you to all the doctors and first responders that brought Dan home, because these people that saved him and worked with him in Utah, they do this every day, and they don't get the recognition they deserve. To from the EMT that got him to the hospital, to the emergency room, to the honor guard, to the nurses that would walk with him up and down the hospital, steps, or help him practice how to swallow. They all were a key influence on him recovering. And he wanted to say thank you to all of them and make sure that people realized what happened throughout this whole ordeal to make him live, because they do this every day, and it makes people live. So hopefully by reading this book, you will have, put names to faces of healers, of good people who step up to greatness every day.
Miss A.J.Otjen and the late Mr. Dan Steffensen, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support Burn Over? Miss
Thank you.
Ajay,
Yes.
where do people buy?
Oh, okay. Thank you for
So, where
asking.
do
It's
people can buy?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's available worldwide on Amazon in Kindle and in Audible and it's if you in the western part of the United States, it's on almost every small bookstore. So.
Yes, people, let's support Miss A.J.Otjen, because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering, inspiring books like this to come. So, Miss A.J., thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
More to come, people. See you soon.